Miller Mahdi from 8451 here. Welcome to another episode of The Uplow'd. We're glad you're here. Each month we dig into the world of AI, thick data, machine learning, data science. We invite you to stick around and let us know what you think. Keep an open mind and stay curious.
Welcome to The Uplow'd. I'm your host, Dan O'Keefe. Our guests today are 8451 data scientist Charles Hoffman and Dr. Kahle and Gloria Roderick from the Riley Center for Livable Communities at the College of Charleston. Welcome to The Uplow'd, everyone.
Thanks.
So for our listeners out there who can't see us, today's another virtual episode of The Uplow'd. We're all working and recording safely from separate locations. We're all continuing to play it safe and maintain our social distance. We hope everyone out there is staying safe and healthy as well. How are all of you coping with the pandemic, speaking of which? And in particular, Bob and Gloria, with your respective roles with the Riley Center, how has the pandemic and remote working impacted your ability to be productive?
Well, not greatly. I've got a good computer set up in home office, and I'm able to be quite productive. In some ways, even more productive when I'm in the than when I'm in the office. We have those pesky students who like to ask questions, and
they get in the way, don't they?
yeah, they always have those questions, and again, I miss the personal interaction with my colleagues and students. But in terms of productivity, I'm way up. How about you, Gloria?
Same. I'm fortunate enough to have a space at home that I can dedicate to my work and been able to get a lot done and focus. I, of course, also miss being able to have that face-to-face interaction with my colleagues as well and see all the students and everything. But been able to be productive and get work done and move forward, which has been great.
That's fantastic. And Charles, you and I have talked several times during this pandemic, and I know that you've been plenty busy in spite of it. But what's your take on working remotely, and in particular, how 8451 is managing that?
I think it's been a journey. It's gotten easier as we all get used to Zoom and making sure I hit the unmute button before I talk every time, because I'm always on mute with the kids. But I think it's gotten easier from the beginning when daycares were closed and everything. There were a lot of people you could see it was tough, and I think that just everybody was very understanding of individual situations, and we're getting through it.
That's great. So let's get on to the topic for today, which is a very important one, especially given the current state of the world and the hardships faced by many of us during the ongoing pandemic. Today we're talking about mapping hunger and food disparity with geographic information systems, otherwise known as GIS. Charles, would you like to kick us off and tell us more about how the Hunger Mapping project in Cincinnati, 8451's headquarters, was initiated?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a DSR on our Stores, Assortment, and Space team, but earlier this year, I helped to plan our Analytics Connect event between 8451 and Kroger, and part of that was an event for everybody on the team to look into health variables and their association with the overall health of different communities within Cincinnati. So through that, we developed a really good working relationship with both the city of Cincinnati, especially Councilman Greg Landsman's office, and then Cincinnati Children's Hospital. So when COVID started, Cincinnati Children's reached out to us just to kind of brainstorm on areas where we could use data science to evaluate potential ability to help ease the effects of COVID. And the main area that we thought would be a good one to step in on was food insecurity within the city of Cincinnati. So we were able to dig in and evaluate that situation, just especially in the wake of the increased need from different factors like unemployment and the lockdown, and also supply difficulties around school closure, which was a big point of distribution prior to that for kids to get meals, and also volunteer constraints around your older population that normally is able to volunteer and now has a little less ability as some of them fall into a high-risk category. Mm-hmm. So we were able to just iterate on some methodology development with Cincinnati Children's to use census data to map the highest areas of need around poverty and especially child poverty concentrations within the city of Cincinnati. And then from there, evaluate how our free food distribution sites were oriented within the city to serve those different areas of need. So we have Free Store Food Bank, La Soup, United Methodist Church Ministries, and Cincinnati Public Schools are some of the big players there. I kind of usually explain the map as, think about us overlaying a heat map of the areas of highest need in the city. So the red areas are our highest concentrations of poverty within the city. And then on top of that, we overlay the 1 mile walk areas around our different food distribution sites in green. Mm-hmm. So when you have that green overlaid on top of the red, the areas that you still see red are your gaps in coverage, to where areas with a higher concentration of poverty would need to walk more than a mile to get to a free food distribution site. So our goal was just to have a meal within a mile of all of those. And that was kind of the methodology that we walked through to solve that with children's, and then we're able to get it in front of the right people. I think later on we have in the agenda to kind of talk about the results of that.
Great. And remind me, for everyone listening and viewing, is the map that you just mentioned, is that available to a public audience, or is that just for the agency partners, or a little bit of both?
A little bit of both. So the map that I just referenced, where we have the more complex overlays and the poverty overlays, is available to our stakeholders. So the free stores in the city, and our different partners there, so that they can evaluate their service more effectively. And then we also host an external website that shows where all of the different food distribution locations are, so that the public can access that and see where the closest sites to them are on the days that they need it.
Gotcha. And what was it like for you getting started on this project when you then realized there were similar efforts happening around the country, probably around the world, at least for our purposes today, in other parts of the country?
Yep. So we knew that the need had increased across the country. And at some point during this, Kurt Reiber, who's the CEO over at Free Store, let me know that a board member for Free Store had told him about a similar effort in the Carolinas. And so I asked for their info and reached out to Bob and to Gloria to just kind of compare methodology and see what they were doing. And I was really, really happy to see some of the similarities, as I think it validates the approach that we used, and also just really impressed with their work, as I think it's much more expansive in that it deals with factors past where we looked, which is just an urban area within the city of Cincinnati. The fact that theirs spans the Carolinas and deals with a few more issues with respect to rural populations is just very impressed with it, and happy to see that.
Great. Let's talk to Bob and Gloria about that, actually. Bob and Gloria, Bob, we'll start with you. Tell us about the Riley Center first off, and how you began your GIS hunger mapping work and journey, and maybe how it relates or is very different from what we're doing here in Cincinnati.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for having us today. The mission of the Riley Center for Livable Communities at the College of Charleston is to leverage the resources of the college to enhance the vibrancy, the vitality of the city of Charleston and its environs. Mm-hmm. So we're all about being community-oriented, community-facing, and trying to solve difficult social problems. For me, joining the Riley Center almost 4 years ago, my focus has been on hunger and homelessness primarily, and even more specific than that, taking a look at youth hunger and homelessness. In regard to how we got started into mapping hunger and distribution sites with the GIS system, it was not COVID-driven initially. We started just about a year ago, early August of 2019, and hired Gloria in an internship that was fully paid for by the Low Country Food Bank. One of the roles I was fortunate to play with the Low Country Food Bank is as a facilitator of their strategic planning process, which was in 2018. And one thing that the employees told us, the staff especially, and certainly board members as well, is that they wanted to become a much more data-driven organization. They wanted to make sound decisions rather than good guesses. And so we conceptualized at that point that the GIS application is an important one, and Gloria started building the GIS capability for the Low Country Food Bank. The first couple of meetings were very collaborative. We're kind of showing stuff and seeing if it made sense and whatnot. And so they gave Gloria a lot of feedback, and she developed this product over and over. And the food bank is using the information to plan where they'll have their mobile distributions, for example, identify areas where there's a longer distance to food outlets or food resources, almost identical to the work that Charles just discussed in Cincinnati, although we didn't know about each other at that time. Very, very similar methodologies. And then when COVID hit, we pivoted and became the disaster response measurement firm for the Low Country Food Bank. And now we're looking at data that shows about 4 million meals have been provided by the Low Country Food Bank since March 15th through the end of July.
4 million.
Yeah, 4 million.
Wow.
Yeah, not a typo. And that's a pretty impressive number. Similar to Cincinnati, in Charleston, there's been an overwhelming increase in demand. At the same time, you've got issues that are disrupting the acquisition of food, and also issues in regard to their distribution network. As Charles mentioned, many of the volunteers are 65 plus and in high-risk categories. So you've got a decrease in volunteers and food and a massive increase in demand. It has made for a very difficult time for the Low Country Food Bank, and frankly, food banks all over the country. For us, the rewarding part is that we know that the data that we're providing them is allowing them to very efficiently distribute large amounts of food to those who are most in need.
That's fantastic. And speaking of that, Gloria, can you kind of help us understand some specifics of how you're able to do that? How are you logistically managing to distribute that food, leveraging data and GIS?
Right. So we're using the Esri ArcGIS platform to do all of our analysis, and they've been a wonderful partner in helping us learn how to use their tools.
That's Esri, ESRI, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So like Bob said, when I first came on board as a graduate research assistant, we started looking at where had the food bank put food historically. What did that look like on a basic map of their 10-county coastal service range? And we found different areas that historically had gaps in them, especially in more rural areas. And we found a lot was in our more Charleston area. So when we decided to look at which areas had a greater need than others, it was important for the food bank to make sure that their food was being distributed equitably. And so we needed to help define that in a data-driven sense. So we pulled a lot of census data, tracked it at the census tract level, mapped it out. And these demographic types included the median household income, average family size for the area, whether or not the percentage of the population had access to a car, really different demographics such as those. Percentage of children in Title I schools was a factor for us as well. So we really wanted to give them as many data points that would essentially overlay on each other and show repeatedly this is an area of need. Mm-hmm. And again, similar to the methodology that Charles was using, we used a drive time analysis. For us, because we were dealing with urban and rural areas, we did, I believe, a 10 and 15 minute drive time analysis was kind of what served our demographic best. And we were able to layer that on top of these areas of greatest need, find the gaps where it was unreasonable to be within about a 15-minute drive time of any food pantry, and show that these areas are where the food bank may want to distribute more product.
So can you lean in a little bit more on the rural versus urban areas and tell us how the problem truly differs between those areas, the cities and the rural areas?
Yeah, so there are several factors that go into that. One being ease of access. So in a more rural area, you've got maybe an elementary school, maybe a high school that's really a central location point for a food distribution. And that may be the only place that it can really work in, based on needing a large plot of land, some concrete to set a truck on for distribution. And so we really had to help find those locations versus in a more urban area, there are a lot of other partners that have access to land that can be used for distribution. There are just more nonprofits working in the space to partner with than what may be found in a rural area. Also, we factor in a rural area, it's going to take longer to get there. And that was the reason for the 15-minute drive time analysis. When we do focus more on our urban areas, we look closer at a 5-minute drive time analysis instead.
Gotcha. And by the way, a quick question that wasn't on our agenda for today, but you've referred to low country many times. For those of us not familiar with the Carolinas to that length of degree, can you explain what low country means and how it relates to either city or rural?
Sure. So it encompasses about 10 counties in our state for our purposes, which range from basically the southernmost coastal county to the northernmost coastal county. And a couple of counties inland of that. So it includes counties such as Beaufort, Charleston County, Dorchester, and Horry County, which contains Myrtle Beach.
Gotcha. All right. Now you're bringing home with Myrtle Beach. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Myrtle Beach to the north and beautiful Beaufort and Hilton Head to the south.
Gotcha. That's helpful. Thank you both. So now that we've understood how you each independently are approaching GIS and data to map hunger and food disparity, can you share some results that you've all noticed from your various hunger mapping work? Let's start with Bob and Gloria.
Yeah, I'll go first, Gloria, and then you add in. The result that was most, I think, rewarding and productive for us was the ease of analysis for our clients. You don't need to walk through a big regression equation, okay? You don't have to give them reams and reams of data tables. You show them a map and they go, oh my gosh, we got a hole in Kahle County and where we're not serving it. So literally within, 5 minutes? I don't know how long, but I mean, immediately in the meeting, they clearly understood that they had areas that they were not serving well. They had felt this and they had maybe some hypotheses around this, but once they saw the map, they went into action and they said, okay, we got to plan afresh for the middle of Kahle County, like tomorrow or like next week. And so it was very actionable, very easy to understand, although the process that Gloria went through to prepare the map and make it so easy to understand was not simple, but the output is readily digestible by non-analytic folks.
Gotcha. Gloria, anything to add?
Yeah, I would agree with that sentiment of, we can do all the complex analysis, find all of the different formulas that are going to show us those areas of greatest need based on different attributes of those census tracts. But at the end of the day, the mapping of that and using color symbology to show those areas that are standing out so much really makes it easy for a client to understand.
And tell us about the map itself. Charles explained that map is online and accessible via electronic means. Are we talking the same for the map that you created, or tell us about that exactly?
Yeah, so we have what we consider the public-facing map, which includes all of our COVID food distribution sites through the Low Country. So that's where people can go and get either a box or a meal. All those things are listed on the site, and they can just do a quick click for Find Near Me. They're given a lot of different sites that are within 10 miles of their found location on their device. So that's our public-facing side. On the back end for our client, for the Low Country Food Bank, we have a lot of things that aren't public-facing, but we've got various maps that show their disaster relief efforts and the number of meals that they've distributed through that, and a drive time analysis layered with that. Then we've got other maps showing their different mobile distribution sites, how those have been mapped out throughout the last couple of years, and giving ideas for areas that they may want to move those to or add locations to. So there's a lot of different back-end maps that are specific to our client.
Gotcha. And you pointed something out that we haven't really gotten into here. In your particular case, you're spanning 2 states, right? Or 10 counties within 2 states, right?
10 counties in one state.
10 counties in one state. I'm sorry, but also you guys are impacted much more severely than we in Ohio on average, and a lot of other states, because you have weather impact situations that are occurring in the midst of COVID, right? And still, Bob, I think you mentioned the number 400 meals served. Was that just within the last several months of COVID, or was that since you started a year ago?
No, actually 4 million meals, Dan, provided from approximately March 15th through the end of July in the 10 county low country area.
Wow, that's impressive. That's fantastic, guys.
Yeah, to be very specific about it, because the distribution process has changed, used to be that the client could walk into kind of like a free store environment, and it's like a produce market, and then pick what they want. We call that the client choice approach. We feel that it's a higher integrity, a more comfortable way for the consumer to get what they want. That has all changed because we've had to move to really a touchless approach. So now what happens is boxes get packed with a variety of foods. Oftentimes things that need to be kept cold are in one box, things that can be that are shelf stable without needing to be cooled in another, and they pull up in lines, and the volunteer or the worker simply drops the box in the trunk of the vehicle, and then we move on to the next one. That's all done to protect both the volunteers and the staff, as well as the individuals who are seeking the food. For many, during this period, it's the first time that they've ever had to reach out to this type of resource. About 40% of the individuals who are now asking for food from the Low Country Food Bank never had to do it prior to COVID. Wow. So you got a lot of folks who don't know what to do, don't really know the process. And then we use a formula about 1 meal per 1.2 pounds of food distributed. We know what the poundage is, and then we do the math to come up with an estimate of the number of meals.
Wow, it's amazing what data can do to help solve problems like this, right?
It is, and the biggest fans we have is our client base. Yeah. And I was just there yesterday meeting with them, and they're so thankful that we're helping them during this time of incredible need. You mentioned the weather, and the stories that I'm sure appear in Cincinnati and whatnot are all about this hurricane or that hurricane. One of the biggest things we deal with is very high humidity and really hot weather. And this is the story about 4 or 5 months a year. So when you think about the volunteers out there working 3 or 4 hours moving, 30-pound boxes in 95-degree heat, that is the piece of the weather that affects us most commonly. Yeah. and most completely. This last storm, we were fortunate. It missed us, and there was very little damage in our low country area. Unfortunately, some folks further up the coast got it worse. One of the things we do with our food banks, though, and this is the reference to the 2 states in 1 team, is we have an association across both the Carolinas called Feeding the Carolinas, and this represents the 10 food banks in those 2 states. And we like to say 2 states, 1 team. So what happens when our folks in Raleigh got hit with this last storm is that the other food banks can send supplies, and most importantly, skilled workers, folks who know how to drive these big forklifts and how to run these lifts in the warehouses. Don't think about food in the suburban. Think about 18-wheelers pulling up one after another after another, and you got to unload that stuff. So that's kind of the mutual assistance that we can provide. So if one gets hit, the others can help. And we saw a lot of that last year, particularly with Dorian. COVID is a different situation because every food bank is having a hurricane every day. Yeah. So it's been more difficult with this to provide mutual relief across the food banks. And it's still being done, but not at the same level as when we have a weather emergency.
Gotcha. Well, and Charles, that's a good segue back to Cincinnati. COVID does not discriminate, right? It's impacting food banks the same way all across the country. Tell us, though, quickly, what are the results that we've seen thus far from the work that you and Children's in the city of Cincinnati and the councilman's office and so on and so forth have been able to accomplish with this effort in particular as we leverage data and GIS?
Yep. So after we iterated with Children's, Councilman Landsman's office was able to set up some weekly connects with the different food organizations in Cincinnati public schools to get that data in front of them. So similar to what Gloria talked about, initially it was more just educating everybody and getting them on the same page of the analysis that we had conducted, and then pointing out where we saw potential gaps. I would say that initially, in a very quick span, Cincinnati Public Schools and the others had really pivoted from pre-COVID to post-COVID in a great way to limit the gaps, but there were still a few. So we recommended a site in Villages of Roll Hill in Cincinnati that was a very high need area that seemed underserved at the time. And that one was doing about 1,000 meals a day by the second day. And then we also recommended a site at the Montana AF Church of the Nazarene that served about 800 emergency meal boxes in a day. I've also seen where Free Store seems to use the data to optimize their large distributions in the areas where they have the highest need. So they have National Guard support right now within Ohio and Kentucky, and they have done some large-scale distributions at places like Elder, Xavier's Arena parking lot, or Paul Brown.
High schools, colleges, right?
Yeah, big parking lots, essentially. Where they're giving out like 1,000 plus emergency meal boxes a day. So when those equate to about 20 meals per box, you're talking 20,000 plus meals in one event. Because similar to what Bob said, Free Store is seeing a 60% increase in food distribution since the pandemic. The data point that really hits home to me is an anecdote that Kurt Reiber from Free Store shared, that he had someone come in who he recognized as a volunteer with his daughter. And the daughter asked the father if they were coming back in to volunteer. And he said, we've given quite a few deposits over time, and right now we're here to make a withdrawal. And that's when it really hits home to me, having kids, that, to Bob's point, there is a lot of new demand from people that have never had the need before. So our work's been centered around that gap analysis at the beginning and trying to optimize the distribution network, then putting together the public-facing map so that everyone was aware of that. So now we're focused on managing that map to where the data stays up to date as schools reopen and things, but also we're working with Children's to try to analyze the supply from all these different distribution organizations against the demand and track that over time to show how different events have affected it and how hopefully help leaders and organizations better evaluate food needs and the policy associated with that.
Gotcha. So last question really to all of you. What does this mean for the future of data science and GIS? You know, what are we as data scientists and others, especially regarding how we approach solving societal issues like hunger and food disparity? What do we do with this? Where do we take it from here?
I'll go first. I believe that the biggest lesson from this is that the techniques and tools that we have used for marketing research and for traditionally building, stores and retail distribution networks can be transferred to the nonprofit public good. And so I think developing a cadre of individuals like Charles, like Gloria, who know these tools and have a big heart because they're concerned about their neighbors in need. I think this is a whole new marketplace for GIS. Most nonprofits are not sophisticated enough to say we need GIS, but at least our client in this case, Low Country Food Bank, said we need to be sophisticated enough so that we're making data-driven decisions every day. How are you going to help us get there? And that's where Gloria came in to really lay the foundation for our work going forward. And we think we'll be working on this for years to come.
Wow. Unfortunately, it's needed, right? But at least it's great that you're there to do that. Gloria, any thoughts to tag on to what Bob shared about the future of GIS and data around these types of issues?
Yeah, I think we're going to continue to see the public sector and the nonprofit sector, especially, start to pick up and use GIS technology and data for driving decision making. I think a lot of times they don't have the capacity to have a full data staff, but I think it's going to move forward. I think COVID has kind of opened a lot of people's eyes to what the every platform can do. You know, we all saw the John Hopkins COVID map, and I think a lot of users, consumers saw that and said, what else can we do with this? And this is something that we're just going to keep continuing that trend.
Gotcha. So guys, in addition to hunger, what are the other applications for mapping? You know, what other problems can we potentially solve with this same technology and approach? Any thoughts?
Healthcare access is really starting to take off as mapping. Different hospital units are using it to see where their clinics are and where they may have gaps in service. For our rural areas, we're starting to see that be used. Finding prescriptions is another use. Again, finding those areas where consumers are having a harder time getting access to goods. We're going to continue to see GIS used for that application.
Great.
To add to that, I think there'll be uses for environmental, particularly when we have environmental factors that affect people's health. You know, we've got sea level rise going on here, and there's kind of the gentrification that the poor people get moved to the low-lying areas, and the rich people get to go to the higher areas where they're not going to flood. So having a good understanding of what our risks are in regard to sea level rise and the way that that relates to the safety and well-being, not only of our well-off neighbors, but of those who may not have the same level of financial resources, I think is a very important area that we can work on. And of course, everybody probably knows about CompStat, which is the policing application of GIS. Started in New York. I built one of these systems years ago in the 90s where it was not very sophisticated. We were literally started by doing the pin maps. Those are pins into a map where we would track the murders in the city. And ultimately we got to a place where we could do that electronically and in a much more sophisticated way, not just to be able to visualize what has happened, but to identify the hotspots so the cops can be there before it happens. And so we try to prevent this level of violence and murder. So, I mean, there's a wide range of things, but those are two that I think are most important.
Great. Well, one thing is certain. Folks like you, data scientists, GIS professionals, are taking technology and leveraging it in ways that many probably had not thought about. And it's truly making a difference. It's easy to imagine how it could make a difference in our daily lives because we're seeing what a drastic difference it's making during COVID. So thank you to all of you for that. And before we close out, we're going to kind of end things on a lighter note. It is time for the 8451 lightning round, where we ask you a series of 8 random questions for 51 seconds. Charles, Bob, and Gloria, are you ready?
Ready.
Yes.
Okay, great. Charles, what time of the day are you most productive?
Usually after 5. If I'm working after 5, then I need to get stuff done pretty well.
Gotcha. Bob, what's your favorite way to exercise?
Swimming with my snorkel on, doing it frogman style.
Interesting. Gloria, what's the first thing you think about in the morning?
The weather.
Gotcha. Charles, what would you do if you didn't have to work tomorrow?
Play golf.
Bob, what's your favorite sound?
Reggae bass line.
Gloria, what challenges you?
Pleasing multiple people.
Charles, what's the last item you purchased?
Chipotle burrito bowl.
Lunch. Bob, what's your best piece of advice for young people?
Stay humble and work on those listening skills.
Fantastic. Guys, we beat it. We beat the clock on this one. This one moved really quickly. All credit goes to you because I tend to talk too much. So fantastic job, guys. Thanks for helping us out on that lightning round. And we want to end here by thanking sincerely Charles Hoffman, Bob Kahle, and Gloria Roderick for being our guests today If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and share it with your networks. Bob and Gloria, please share with your networks if you enjoyed the experience. We really appreciate you joining us today again. Charles, thanks again. We'll be talking. You're doing a great job with the Hunger Mapping in Cincinnati. Please keep up the great work. And I am your host, Dan O'Keefe, and we will see you next time on The Upload. Take care.
Millen here. That's it for this month's episode of The Upload. We hope you enjoyed it and hopefully learned something new. Remember to give us a like and share your feedback. Until next month, stay curious.